On the 1st of March 2018, Vladimir Putin stood in the Manage Exhibition Hall in Moscow and spent 30 minutes of a 2-hour address unveiling 6 new weapons. There were infographics. There were animated videos of warheads arcing across the globe. His summary: no one in the world possesses anything remotely similar. 8 years later, the fighter, the tank, the Doomsday torpedo and the unlimited range cruise missile exist mostly in the numbers announced for them. What was actually built runs into the dozens where it was promised in the thousands, and in 2 cases, the men who built it are the ones who said so. Russia has been here before. In the summer of 1958, the American intelligence community issued its formal estimate of Soviet missile strength. It projected 100 operational intercontinental ballistic missiles by 1960, and perhaps 500 by 1962. The US Air Force went further, estimating 500 by 1960 alone. The real number, according to CIA documents declassified in 2011, was 4 missiles. On the strength of that phantom arsenal, the United States reorganized budgets, reshaped doctrine, and fought a presidential election over a gap that did not exist. The Soviets never had to build them. They only had to let Washington believe the missiles were coming. The first Soviet ICBM entered what Moscow called combat service in January 1960. By the end of that year, 2 were deployed. It took until September of 1961 for a revised national estimate to cut the projection to somewhere between 10 and 25 launches. That is the mechanism. An announcement, delivered with enough confidence and enough production value, generates a real effect in the mind of the adversary. Whether that effect is the intended goal is a matter of interpretation. That the effect occurs is documented, which is why the 2018 speech matters more for its timing than its contents. It came 17 days before the presidential election of the 18th of March. Chatham House classifies 5 of the 6 systems as principal nuclear programs. Only the Kinzhal is sub-strategic, with a range under 5,000 kilometers, and assesses that none of them fundamentally alter the strategic nuclear balance between the United States and Russia. Both sides remained equally capable of destroying the other. That was true before the speech, and it was true after. Which leaves a harder question. If the systems don't change the balance, what is actually being delivered when they are announced? The Su-57 Felon flew for the first time as the T-50 prototype on the 29th of January 2010. In 2019, at the Army Forum, Russia signed a firm contract for 76 aircraft to be completed by 2027. Everything about that promise rested on the engine. The Su-57 flies on the AL-41F1, an engine from the previous generation, the same one used in the Su-35S. 15,000 kilograms. Force in afterburner. The second stage engine, the Izdalia 30, later designated AL-51F1, was designed for 17 to 18,000. It first flew in a prototype on the 5th of December 2017. In December 2025, Rostec announced the first flight of a series production Su-57 with second stage engines. 8 years after that prototype test, 15 years after the T-50 first left the ground. Without those engines, technical assessments hold that the aircraft does not meet the supercruise requirement written into its own original specification. If this is useful so far, a quick like genuinely helps the channel. The delivery record is thinner still. Documented annual production runs 6 aircraft in 2022, 11 or 12 in 2023, at least 5 in 2024. The United Aircraft Corporation closed out 2025 with no official announcement of Su-57 deliveries to the aerospace forces, while announcing deliveries of the Su-35S, the Su-34, and the Tu-160M. Estimates put the total fleet at around 32 airframes in 2026, prototypes included, against the 76 promised. In 2025 alone, Lockheed Martin delivered 191 F-35s, a program record. The global fleet passed 1,300 aircraft. In 1 year, the United States delivered roughly 6 times what the Su-57 program has produced in 16. The tank made its promise more visibly and broke it faster. The T-14 Armata debuted on Red Square at the Victory Day Parade on the 9th of May 2015. During the rehearsal in front of the public, it broke down and stopped. The procurement plan called for 2,300 tanks delivered between 2015 and 2020. Then the number began to move. In 2016, the Defense Ministry signed for a test batch of 100. At Army 2018, The contract was 32 T-14s and 100 T-15s. Delivery by 2021. 2,300 had become 32 in 3 years. The design itself was genuinely ambitious, an unmanned turret with a crew of 3 sealed in an armored capsule inside the hull. British Defence Intelligence assessed in 2023 that 11 years into development, the program had been dogged with delays and estimated production probably only in the low tens. The Russians said something harder. TASS confirmed the T-14 saw combat in Ukraine and confirmed its subsequent withdrawal from the front line, reported in September 2023. A Russian military source described it this way: several units participated in battle to see how the tank would perform. American intelligence assessed the performance as below expectations, and Sergei Chemezov, chief executive of Rostec, the company that builds it, said the Armata was somewhat expensive and that its role in Ukraine was limited because it was too valuable to risk. The Jamestown Foundation estimates the T-14 cost between 400 and 700 million rubles in 2015 and 2016, $5.5 to $9.5 million. The T-90M is estimated between 2 and 4.5 million. Russia went to war with the T-72B3M, the T-80BVM, and the T-90M. The third case never had to work at all, because its promise was physics. The Burevestnik 9Mi730, designated SSC-X-9 Skyfall by NATO, was presented on the 1st of March 2018 as a nuclear-powered cruise missile of practically unlimited range. The test record tells a different story. The Nuclear Threat Initiative, citing U.S. intelligence sources, reports at least 13 tests between 2017 and 2019, of which 2 were partially successful. U.S. intelligence holds that only the November 2017 test at Pankovo was moderately successful. Russia maintains that no test has failed. On the 8th of August 2019, at the State Central Navy testing range near Nyonoksa, something detonated. The Defense Ministry reported 2 dead. Rosatom corrected the figure to 5 specialists killed and confirmed a radiation release connected to a test involving an isotope power source. Rosgidromet recorded a gamma radiation spike in Severodvinsk, 29 miles away. 5 men died on a test range, and the number of dead was wrong for a day. Then came October 2025. Chief of the General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, reported that on the 21st, the missile flew 14,000 kilometers in roughly 15 hours and completed all prescribed vertical and horizontal maneuvers, an official Russian account of an official Russian test, with no independent confirmation that any Burevestnik test has been fully successful. Putin said something else that day. The armed forces, he noted, still need to determine how the weapon would be employed and prepare the relevant infrastructure. 7.5 years after the missile was unveiled as a finished capability. And in October 2023, 2 years before that test, Putin had already announced a successful final test of the same missile. Meanwhile, satellite imagery analyst Decker Eveleth identified a possible launch site in September 2024, adjacent to a warhead storage facility at Vologda, some 300 miles northwest of Moscow. The infrastructure exists. The employment concept, by Putin's own account, does not. With the 4th weapon, 2 Russian statements cannot both be true. Poseidon first surfaced publicly in 2015 through the Status 6 leak on Russian state television and was confirmed officially in the March 2018 speech. Its carrier is real and enormous. The submarine Belgorod, K-329, Project 09852, was delivered in 2022, adapted to launch 6 Poseidons. It displaces 30,000 tons and runs 604 feet, the longest operational submarine in the world. Putin has claimed the Poseidon's reactor is 100 times smaller than a submarine's and that its warhead exceeds the yield of the Sarmat ICBM. Neither claim has been independently verified. In January 2023, TASS reported that the first batch of Poseidon munitions had been manufactured for the Belgorod. That same month, TASS also reported throw tests using mock-ups without the reactor engaged. Then, on the 28th of October 2025, Putin announced what he described as a first. In his words, "For the first time, we managed not only to launch it with a launch engine from a carrier submarine, but also to launch the nuclear power unit." The Kiev Post noted the obvious. A weapon whose first batch was manufactured in 2023 had its first powered launch in 2025. Both statements are Russian. They do not require a Western analyst to be in tension with each other. Russia declared in 2019 that it planned to put 32 Poseidons into combat service, with no timeline attached. Reuters observes that confirmed details about the system remain few. The Kinzhal is different because the Kinzhal was used. It was unveiled in the same March 2018 speech. Putin called it an ideal weapon, flying at 10 times the speed of sound and defeating air defense systems. CSIS records the claimed range as 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers, with speeds up to Mach 10, carried by a modified MiG-31K interceptor. The first known combat employment came on the 19th of March 2022, against an underground ammunition depot at Delyatin, in the Ivano-Frankivsk region. Ukrainian Air Force Command spokesman Yuri Ikhnat confirmed the missile strike. American officials told CNN the missile was tracked in real time during flight, independent confirmation that a launch occurred. The promise, however, was not that the missile would fly. The promise was that nothing could stop it. Early on the 4th of May 2023, over Kiev, a Patriot battery intercepted one. Ukraine's Air Force said so first, an interested party. On the 10th of May, Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder confirmed the interception in a briefing. Lieutenant General Mykola Oleshchuk, commanding Ukraine's Air Force, put it plainly. Yes, they had shot down the unparalleled Kinzhal. On the 16th of May, Ukraine claimed 6 Kinzhals downed in a single night. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu disputed it, telling RIA Novosti that Russia had not launched as many Kinzhals as Kiev says it has shot down. CSIS assesses that calling the Kinzhal hypersonic is misleading, since virtually all ballistic missiles reach hypersonic speeds. Analysts assess the missile as derived from the ground-launched 9K-720 Iskander-m short-range ballistic missile, though not as a pure copy. The tail section was redesigned, the fins reduced, and the engine nozzles given special protection for high-speed flight, but it follows a modified ballistic trajectory, not a sustained hypersonic glide. It is not a true hypersonic glide vehicle, so the Kinzhal was delivered as a fast missile that works. It was not delivered as the weapon no defense could touch. That second promise was refuted publicly, in front of witnesses, in May 2023. In every one of these cases, the announcement produced a measurable effect on perception before any hardware reached a unit. Whether that effect was the objective is an open reading. That it occurred is documented. There is a competing explanation, and it deserves equal weight. Chatham House attributes the delivery failures to the burden of international sanctions and the demands of the war, which exposed and intensified pre-existing deficiencies in Russia's military-industrial base. Russia falls back on legacy Soviet-era systems and research and struggles to build genuinely new ones. The same institution also records that the announcements themselves are the message. As often with official Russian communications, the most potent capability is the one being conveyed. Both readings can be true at once. A state can intend to signal and fail to build, but mechanisms wear out. The International Center for Defense and Security observes that across the war, Western fear of escalation diminished, that Western states expanded military support to Ukraine despite repeated Russian warnings, and that actions once considered escalatory became routine. That is the cost, and it should not be mistaken for Russian impotence. Russia has employed hypersonic systems against Ukraine, notably the aeroballistic Zircon and the semi-ballistic Kinzhal. Some things get delivered. In 1958, a phantom arsenal of 4 missiles moved American budgets, doctrine, and an election. 67 years later, the arsenals are still being announced faster than they are being built. But the audience has learned to wait for the delivery, and that is a currency you can only spend once. There is a case where the gap between announcement and reality closed the hard way, at sea, in the space of a single week. Click on